So now I've got the lino lined up on its mount and put inside the printing press frame. I can show you the adaptation that Ben has made to the frame so that I can print with a deckle. So what he's done is to cut a piece of mount board to fit inside the metal frame. Now the metal frame you'll have seen without the mount board if you watched the film about my printing press. And then if you've also watched the film about the hints for the hand registration device that we sell, you'll have seen a little section in there where I've shown how to make the registration device work with, if you want to print postcards or greetings cards where you want a very small piece of paper and you don't want to use the whole frame. Basically the principle's the same, it's an inserted piece of card. And if I put it down, you can see that the card has an irregular border that actually inserts the card into the area of the print, the printed area. There won't be any inking in these parts, but it's still within the image. That's because I'm using paper with a deckle and I want to print right up to the edge of the deckle. So the registration actually has to be within the image area. Now you can see here that we've got crosses to mark registration all the way around. And again, if you watch the one on the hand printing registration device, I show you why that's important there. The other thing I've done is to draw a guide that's the size of the paper. It's not exact because of the deckle, but it's enough for me to get the paper straight. Really important to get both the lino straight and the paper straight if you want to use deckled paper and keep the deckle, because you cannot trim it if it's crooked. So when I was talking in the film about my thoughts for designing this image, I said that I didn't want any cut off bits of the image because of the sort of aesthetic of it all being contained within the deckle. There is another really good pragmatic reason for not having an edge to my print, a straight edge to the print, because I would be very concerned about getting that exactly parallel to the deckled edge of the paper. Likewise, it's a really good idea not to have a straight horizon. So if I had a distant view where I had to have a natural horizon that was straight, again, I'd be very worried about getting that level, because as a landscape printmaker, I absolutely understand that horizons have to be straight. So here, the hill's slanting off, so I'm not precisely, if I'm a mil or two out, it's not going to matter. So the paper I'm using, if you remember, is the Kitakata washi paper, the Japanese paper. This is Kitakata Select from the Awagami Paper Factory. It's 36 grams, so it's very light and it's translucent. I can see through it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop it down onto the card and I'm going to line it up with that outline that is the size of the paper so that I know I've got the paper straight. And then I'm going to tack it down into place. And I'm going to use masking tape. And in the last video with the hand printed device, I said that to use 2 pieces of tape and to make kind of a hinge at one end of the paper. And that's what I'd normally do. But when I'm using a paper as delicate as this, I'm going to tack it down with little bits of masking tape all around the paper. I would never normally tack down all around the paper. The reason I'm doing it is because this paper is so delicate that when I start moving the frame up and down, it moves so easily it could move and change the registration. So I'm actually tacking it down all the way around. The next thing I need to do is to mark the registration. And because this paper is so thin, I can actually see through it to mark up those little crosses that Ben's drawn on this card insert for me. So I can actually take a ruler and go round. Now I use a ruler, and when I'm marking up registration, I really take my time and work my way around very methodically. I can't emphasise enough how important it is to be precise when you're marking up registration, especially if you're using a frame like this or the handheld registration device, because if you don't mark up properly and all the way around, you can't line things up accurately, and if you don't line them up accurately, you start getting offsets. And if, like me, you're working at sort of 16 to 20 layers, that very quickly turns into a horrible mess. So I'm really, really careful about marking it up. So I won't mark all the way around now, but what I will do is tell you other ways of handling working with deckled paper. So you've just watched me use that very lightweight Kittakata paper on the printing press, and I was able to see right through the paper to make my registration marks. But it's not always the case that the paper's light enough for you to see through. So I just wanted to show you a couple of other ways to work. So one of the ways that you can work, and for this I'm going back to Japanese woodblock printing, is simply to own the registration system. So if I show you this print here, you can see I've got a deckle all the way around the print, but I've actually cut away the deckle for my registration. Now this is Japanese woodblock, completely different sort of registration, but you can see here clearly enough that I've cut away where the registration is, and I'm cool with that. I like the fact that it shows it has registration. So that's one way of doing it, is just to trim away the deckle where needed and just own the fact that it needs registering to print it. So that's fine, but if you don't want to do that, then what you can do is, and I've got one here to show you, is to make sure that you have a paper with a straight edge and attach it to the paper with the deckle. Now here I've attached it with tape, and that would allow me to put it on the frame and put my registration marks there. But you do have to be careful, because you have to be sure that of two things, in fact. The first is that your inking doesn't come under where the tape is. If you have your block inked under where the tape is, when you press with the press, the pressure will be great enough that there will be more pressure where the tape is and less pressure where the tape isn't, and you'll end up with a dark square where that tape was. So you can't have your inked block coming where the tape is. The other thing is that you have to be sure that once it's been through the press, that you can actually take it off without doing any damage. And you can hear it. I've got away with it, but you could hear it probably pulling at the fibres there. So that's one way of doing it, but you have to be sure that you're using a not too sticky tape and the block is away from the edge. If that's not possible, then there's another approach you can take, and that's to use a very thin tape. Now this is a Japanese washi paper. It's a washi tissue paper, and if you watched my film on choosing papers, I talk a bit about why washi is very, very strong, and this is a very fine paper. And what I've done is I've stuck the paper strip to the back of my paper with the deckle and to another piece of paper as before. And what I've used to do that is rice paste. Now, this is the rice paste that I use when I do Japanese woodblock printing. Whole other story, we may get there, we may not with these films. But this rice paste, it's also a very effective glue, and all I've done is to take my paper, brush on a bit of glue and stick it to the back. Now this paper is so thin that when I've finished, I could simply run a knife across and take that piece off, or if I wanted to be really careful about it, I could get a damp cloth and just damp the back of the tape, and that would release the rice glue. I could peel it away and it would be absolutely fine. These two approaches I would only recommend if you're using fairly heavyweight paper though. It needs to be a reasonably sturdy paper. If it's too delicate, all this messing about on the back of it will be a problem. So that's a way of dealing with it. So the other thing that you can do is to actually make your own deckle by cutting the paper with water after you've made the print. Now this is a scary thing to do, and it's probably a good idea to have a lot of practice before you embark on something that you've printed. But I did just want to show you how to create a deckle with water. So here is a piece of paper, and I've actually created a deckle on two sides. Now this is washi. Washi is probably the most rewarding paper to do this technique with because it has long paper fibres, and so you get quite a nice edge to it. I have got one here that I did on Fabriano Artistico, and it has created a textured edge. It was a little easier to do than the washi, but it was less rewarding. So you can see that's the natural deckled edge of the Artistico, and that's my water cut edge there. So what I'm going to do to water cut this deckle is to take a ruler. Now you will need to measure where you want your edge to be, but I'm just going to have mine here. And I've got some water in this little dish and a brush, and I'm just going to start running the brush down the length of the ruler, damping the paper. And this takes a little bit of time to do and a lot of care, so I really do recommend that you practice. And as the paper starts to get wet, so I can start to work it up over the roller. So I'm just going to start working. So the side I'm working with is the non-precious side. It's a bit like cutting your lino. This is the non-precious side that sees all the work. So I'm going to start running it down, more water there just to get it eased. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to pull the paper apart. I'm not like ripping it like you would tear paper normally. What I want to do is just prise the two halves apart. So just takes a little time. So now I think it's about ready, and I'm just pulling gently to separate, and as I'm pulling, those fibres just coming away. So I'm just being careful to work my hand down the length of the paper and just tease those fibres away. That's it. There we go. So what I've done is to create another deckled edge there. You can just see those lovely long washi fibres there. So water cutting a deckle after you've printed, hair-raising stuff, but it can be done. So that's a little bit about working with a deckle, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and join me again for another film. Thanks a lot.